Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard. I'm TCaptainX. Going to be doing an updated top loadouts video because my first video that I did earlier in the season, I feel like was a little bit off, and I've made some tweaks and adjustments to my my tier list here, especially after getting more playtime. The biggest thing I was wrong on was the long range meta, and that the new ABR, the burst gun, is absurdly good. It is probably, when it comes to long range, it is the #1 gun, and that is because when we break it down here, you look at the long range time to kill. It's essentially the fastest long-range TTK outside of the FFAR, but it has by far the best recoil. Now, these recoil ratings are a little bit subjective, but I think I think everyone can agree the ABR has next to no recoil. The only downside is that it is a burst, but it's an auto burst, so you don't have to keep hitting the trigger. So that's really the only awkward part of that about this gun. You know, otherwise though, when we're talking about more close to mid-range fight, so we're talking like less than 75 meters, the meta is very open. So Rebirth Island, there is a lot of options to use, but Verdansk, I think the ABR is like a clear #1 here. Now, the reason why the ABR has two numbers for the close range TTK, this is like 50 meters and within, is because if you hit all chest shots, you can get a crazy good TTK. Basically, you can two burst an enemy, get this really fast TTK of 606 milliseconds. However, if you missed one of those shots, you will have to basically get a third burst in, and so it ends up being a bit slower. Now, guns like the GPR and the FFAR have some crazy good closer range TTKs. So if you're an aggressive player on Rebirth Island, these guns are phenomenal. The FFAR, I'm constantly, people always ask me, why don't you rank the FFAR higher? It's just because it has by far the worst recoil. You also ideally need to run this build either iron sight or with a compensator. So it just makes it even harder to use in that situation. I would say on Rebirth, the next best AR is going to be the Cypher, especially if you have good recoil control. It does have a little bit bouncy recoil. It's not too bad by any reasons, but it does have excellent TTKs at basically all ranges. Otherwise, the AMES is going to be probably your best long range full auto gun. And that's because the TTK is just a little bit slower than the Cypher, but it's got great bullet velocity, and it has better recoil overall compared to the Cypher. If we jump over to the SMGs here, there are really two kind of clear contenders for #1, but I will say the gap between these and all these other ones is small. All of these other SMGs are very solid, and you can make an argument where they are very good. But the way I've done this is a little bit different. So for the SMGs, I have the chest TTK in this first line at close range, and then I have the combination TTK, which means, when you're hitting different body parts, what are you most likely that TTK you're actually going to probably get? The reason I included that is because a lot of these guns, they have very fast potential chest only TTK. So as long as you hit chest shots or headshots up and you aren't hitting any stomach or legs, you're going to get this very fast TTK. So the Saug, the LC10, the Kompakt, the Jackal, all of these have crazy good TTKs, better than the C9 and Ladra. The problem is, as soon as you miss one or two of those shots and you hit stomach or legs, you're going to get a much slower time to kill. So the LC10, for example, a lot of people are like, oh, but it still has such a good TTK. The problem is it drops off very hard to 600. And then also when we start looking beyond that, it's mid-range. It has a very short range drop off. So its damage range drops off the earliest. And then when it does drop off, that damage drops off very hard, and it becomes one of the slowest killing SMGs outside of that first damage range drop off. Whereas the C9 and Ladra, they're just consistent. You're almost always going to get the same TTK no matter what. And when they drop off, their TTK drop-offs are not as hard, and they have better range than a lot of the other SMGs. And on top of that, the C9, for example, it has probably some of the cleanest, best recoil, along with amazing iron sights. The difference between the C9 and Ladra ultimately comes down to, are you willing to sacrifice and have a little bit faster TTK, but you're going to have a little bit more recoil and probably not quite as good of an iron sight. Me personally, I actually like the Ladra more, although most people will probably prefer the C9 and probably would say it is the #1 overall. Now, one thing I wanted to add here is I do think the Saug is kind of like the sleeper meta, just because you can get this very fast TTK. The combo TTK is still not bad, but the mid-range TTK is actually very good and very on par. And I think you have to hit, as long as you don't hit more than 2 shots lower than the chest, you're going to get this faster TTK. So you definitely can achieve this pretty often. The downside is the recoil. It has like this weird wonky, like horizontal recoil at times. And just because of that is really the big reason why it's not like a top #1 pick for me. So to make things even easier, I've kind of put this in a tier list here. So SMGs, C9 and Ladra are kind of our S tier, and then we have everything else. So you do have the TR2 conversion in here. This one's kind of a weird one, but it is definitely, you know, it deserves to be talked about for sure. When it comes to ARs, I've done it for Resurgence versus Big Map. For Big Map, ABR-A1 is like clear #1. That's what you should be using. But when it comes to Resurgence, I do think you have a lot of options. I think ABR and Cypher are kind of your top two. But I think all of these other ones, and then honestly, probably the FFAR, you could maybe make a case it's in here if you're like a super aggressive player. As far as sniper supports, we have a lot of options here. ASVAL, GPR, FFAR, and the AUG with the rapid fire mod are all excellent options. They're kind of all pretty similar and just have like small differences between them as far as TTK, handling, stuff like that. For snipers, this is kind of an unpopular take, but I have been saying since the beginning of the season that the AMR mod is actually the best sniper. I did a video on this. It is very, very good because it can one-shot headshot, but it also has a crazy fast fire rate too. HCR got nerfed beginning of the season, so it's still good, but not as good. Have some other options that are interesting with really good bullet velocity. And then the car is good on Rebirth only, but I would not recommend it on Verdansk. LMGs are pretty much all horrible. The new LMG was horrible. Shotguns, the Marine SP, it can be fun. It's very hard to use against good players, but it can be fun and can one-shot at very, very close range, but normally it's a two-shot at closer ranges in general. All right, so let's go ahead and break down some of these loadouts. So first, the Saug. This is that one that it's just, when you leave it alone, it just really kicks hard horizontally, and I just don't like it. Otherwise, it would be great, but definitely give it a try if you are, you know, that demon kind of player. And then the AMES, love this gun. Normally do run it as iron sight. Pretty low recoil, fast fire rate is one of my favorite long range guns. So generally my 5 attachment SMG build is almost always the same. The one thing I'm going to be playing around with lately is whether or not to use long barrel versus reinforced. Normally I go reinforced because I like the bullet velocity, but long barrel just gives you a little bit more range. It's really either or, you're fine between that. Otherwise, I pretty much always am going to go Mag 2, Ergonomic, and Infiltrator stock. You can go Balanced stock instead, but I prefer Infiltrator a little bit. And then the underbarrel on, if it's a gun that has a lot of recoil, especially like the Saug, I will go vertical. But normally on guns like the Ladra or the C9, I will go Ranger because it gives you that little bit less recoil control, but also gives you that sprinting movement speed buff as well. And then for the AIMs, now again for ARs, the builds are always going to have the monolithic, the vertical foregrip, and usually Mag 2. The barrel will depend on the gun. For the AIMs, I prefer to go reinforced plus overpressured because this is going to end up giving you a bullet velocity of 1500, which is plenty, especially on Rebirth. Now, if you can't do the iron sights, then I would probably say take off overpressured. You put an optic on. Reinforced without overpressured is 1200. It's decent, but I generally like mine to be like 1300 plus. So then I might instead go gain twist if I was going to run in optic. Now optic, you can go any 1x. Normally I like the Volchivsky or the Dobrik for a 1x. On lower recoil guns like the AIMs, I do sometimes like to go at 2x. You can go 3x, but generally if I'm going to go a higher zoom like a 3x, at that point I will usually put on the RNK multi-zoom. It is a 3x, but it actually has a built-in kind of recoil gun kick buff. Although the 3x is to an extent, but I feel like it's a little bit less visual recoil with the RK. And then for the optic with this one on Warzone, the first one you unlock is a really nice one, the green killer one. Definitely RNK multi-zoom is really nice on certain guns. Next, we got the Ladra. This is my personal favorite SMG. I'm going to rank it number 2, but I use it as my number 1. It is just fast fire rate, great TTK. And then the Cypher, probably the best all around full auto gun as long as you have decent recoil control. Definitely my number 1 full auto on Rebirth for sure. For the Ladra, like I said, same setup that I was using on the Saug, but I am going to go Ranger foregrip on this one. This is definitely one though that a lot of people might prefer to run the vertical foregrip because it does have a little bit more recoil. And then again, you can go long barrel or reinforced here. And then for the Cypher, this is one that I do like to go gain twist on because this is going to get that bullet velocity up really high. I do tend to prefer just to run a single 1x on this. I don't like this gun with higher zoom optics, but this is a gun that does have pretty good iron sights, and you can either go recoil springs or even overpressured. If you were going to go overpressured, then I would swap the barrel to probably reinforced. I think recoil springs makes the most sense here as long as you don't mind them. The irons are definitely good, and the recoil definitely does feel a bit more manageable with recoil springs. Now, if you're looking for a non-BO6 gun that is a lot of fun, the Striker SMG versatility is very good. It actually has a better TTK than the C9. The problem with non-BO6 SMGs is that their slide to fire is very bad. This is the Striker. This is also the special blueprint that gives you better irons. And then a MW2 gun, the TAC-56, is a gun that does have pretty solid TTKs. You do ideally need to run an iron sight build to make it competitive. Still has a bit more visual recoil, but it is a fun and solid gun to use. So like I was saying, the slide to fire time on this is 320 milliseconds, whereas most of the BO6 guns, you can get them down to like 150 or something like that. And so if you are a decent player and you're using movement like you should be, non-BO6 SMGs, you're going to really feel that, and it's just harder to use them aggressively with movement. If you're a more casual player, you don't slide around a lot, then you probably won't even notice it, and the Striker is probably a good gun for you. A lot of different ways that we can run this. This is a setup that has like somewhat decent mobility and pretty good range. And then the TAC-56, again, this one's not bad. Again, I definitely think you need to go iron sight to make it competitive though, so probably going to be better in Resurgence and not that good to use on Verdansk. If you are looking to snipe the AMR mod, I'm telling you guys, it is so underrated. It's a one-shot headshot. Where did that miss, by the way? It is, if you can learn that fire rate, you can two-tap people. It is a two-shot chest shot. It can be three-shot if you hit them in the legs and stuff like that. But it is very good. And then my favorite sniper support right now is the AS-Val. It caught a huge buff this season. It is very good. A ton of fun to use on Rebirth or Verdansk. So for the AMR build here, we're just kind of max up that bullet velocity. We're going monolithic, gain twist, and then over pressured. This does give us a bullet velocity of about 1400, which is better than the HDR. Then the AS-Val here, this is the iron sight build. They actually buffed the recoil spring specifically for the AS-Val here. So we're going vertical, mag 2, ergonomic infiltrator. One other option, especially if you want to use an optic, would be, put on what other optic you want. I normally would go like Kepler. And then the AS-Val has a unique stock called the full stock that gives you aim down sight speed and aim walking movement speed. So it's nice, but you won't get that faster slide to fire and sprint to fire time without using the ergonomic grip. Now, if you're looking for just purely the fastest TTK guns in the game, the Kompakt is great, but it really struggles at range. It's got a good amount of recoil. And then the FFAR, again, same thing. Insane TTKs, but it's got recoil and you got to run a compensator with it. So for the loadouts on these here, to get those better iron sights, I am running the integrated suppressor barrel. This is a unique attachment to the Kompakt because it has that built-in suppressor, so you're not going to ping on the minimap, but it also gives you both bullet velocity and damage range, which is pretty nice. The Ranger foregrip, for whatever reason, gives you better recoil control. Actually, you know what? They fixed this. They just fixed this. That's interesting. Okay, it used to be the Ranger foregrip gave you better recoil control. The vertical foregrip now gives you a bit more horizontal. So maybe worth running the vertical, in all honesty, on this thing. We're going to go mag 3 on this one of the few guns that does have a third mag with that super fast fire rate, ergonomic, and infiltrator stock. And then FFAR. For this one, this is an AR that I will run the compensator on. I will give up that monolith suppressor just because of how much recoil this thing has. Gain twist, vertical, mag 2, and then I'm going to use an optic. You definitely can take off the optic though and put on something like recoil springs. It does make the recoil a lot less, but I don't love the iron sights on this one. And then if you're looking for another sniper support, this is the ABR. This is with that rapid fire mod though, which turns into a full auto. Not as good as long range as the ABR and burst, but this makes it very, very solid at close to mid range, kind of similar to the AS-Val. And then of course the good old Kar 98, if you're looking for just an aggressive fast sniper on Rebirth Island, Kar 98 is still very, very good, but it struggles at range. All right, and the number one overall loadout, C9. It's just the irons are so good. It's got such smooth recoil. And then lastly, the ABR. This thing is just a freaking beam. It is so good, so low recoil. So C9 build, again, exact same as the other SMGs. You can go long barrel or reinforce. I will say I normally run reinforce, but I'm trying out the long barrel, seeing how I like it. If you want to make this as low recoil as possible, definitely go a vertical foregrip, and that will really kind of eliminate that like wobble that it has. But I like Ranger generally. And then ABR here. So I have been liking the RNK multi-zoom, but again, otherwise I would normally go Jason Armory 2X, but a 1X is fine too. It does have that default kind of scope built in, but I just don't like it. It's like too narrow and kind of weird. Monolithic, gain twist, mag 2, and then we're going to go recoil springs and not vertical foregrip. The reason for this is because the recoil springs are going to help with our vertical recoil control, whereas the underbarrel, the vertical foregrip, only does horizontal. This gun doesn't really have hardly any horizontal. It just kind of bursts up. So I would rather use recoil springs to get more of that vertical recoil control. Now, if you are playing Verdansk, I would almost always go a gunfighter AR off the rip. And so in that case, I would go gunfighter ABR. On Verdansk, I would probably go over pressured here and then run vertical foregrip, because this one's going to get the bull velocity to 1800. It's crazy, crazy fast. And it's just going to be insanely good at long range. But if you are going to go gunfighter on Rebirth, I would say you'd probably better to go recoil springs and just make this thing an absolute laser beam, because 1500 bull velocity is plenty on Rebirth. And then I almost never get a gunfighter SMG, but if you did, you don't have to run an optic. You can just run the irons, of course. I don't want to run a laser because I don't want to give away my position since they are visible. So I'm basically just adding recoil springs, and then I'm adding a suppressor just to stay off the minimap. I'm not going to run monolithic because monolithic is going to slow down our ADS and aim walking speed. Those are things I do not want to give up for an SMG, which needs to be good at close range. If you wanted to even lower recoil, though, instead of the suppressor, you could definitely go compensator instead. And then if you wanted to use the Ladra or basically any other SMG, the attachments are going to be basically exactly the same for all of them. Now, as far as tacticals and lethals go, when I'm playing ranked, I have been running flashbangs almost exclusively. They are so strong and so good. Smokes are excellent, especially for rotations, especially for endgame, stuff like that. For big map Verdansk, I would say smokes are the way to go. There are some other, interesting good ones in here that can be pretty strong if used correctly. Stims are just not that good anymore. They're great for gas plays endgame, but that's it. Otherwise, stims are just not all that useful. When I play ranked, I run spring mines here. Because the strategy that we play, I have several videos breaking down how we play ranked, but we like to try to hold top prison, and we use the spring mines to put like on the zip lines and stuff like that. That way we know if we're getting pushed from one side. If I'm playing Rebirth pubs, I'll go throwing knives. Otherwise, impact grenades are probably the best overall for like aggressive players in pubs, but you can't run impacts in ranked. So after that, I would probably go Semtex or frags or thermites. All of them are good options. They're all just a little bit different in how you use them. As far as perks go, the perks that I've been using on Rebirth this season exclusively have been Mountaineer. I know a lot of people kind of talk crap about Mountaineer, that it's not as good as MW3, and it's not, but you can fall off basically all of the top high buildings minus like the tower. And take very little damage. So it's very useful on Rebirth Island, not as useful on Verdansk. On Verdansk, I would probably go instead something like Reflexes, Scavenger, or Survivor. For perk 2, I am going Quick Fix. Now, one thing I want to say is you should not run Survivor and Quick Fix together because they're so similar. It'd be kind of like a waste of a perk. Quick Fix is great. The only annoying thing about Quick Fix is that when you start plating, you cannot cancel your plating, but you can hit fire while plating. So it works in close quarters, but it can be awkward in other situations. In pubs, I would probably go Tracker, but you cannot run Tracker in ranked. Bomb Squad is also very good as well, especially for ranked. And so you can see the enemy prox mines, blast traps, that kind of stuff. And then perk 3, I'm pretty much always going Tempered. Tempered is just such a valuable perk. Having only 2 plates makes plating faster, saves you on plates. Ghost is very good though. Like Ghost is great. I don't normally would recommend like Gung Ho or stuff like that because you can loot Gung Ho very easily in pubs, although you can in ranked. And then alertness is just not as strong. It's just like it's hard to see. It doesn't show which direction. It's not like the OG high alert used to be. And then wildcards, of course, I'm going overkill basically every time, especially on Rebirth. However, if I do have a chance to get my second loadout, I will probably go a gunfighter AR, so I can get an 8 attachment AR. But if I am playing Verdansk, especially Verdansk ranked, I will almost always go gunfighter AR off the rip, just because so many more of your fights happen with your AR, and now your SMG, it's better to have those extra attachments. And then it is good to usually have one battle ready class just as a backup because you're going to spawn in with a supply UAV and a utility box. So it's a good way, like if you need to get a regain or something like that, it's a really good way to grab that and kind of like get that nice regain going. All right, guys, that's going to wrap things up. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like, subscribe, come check out a stream here on YouTube. See you in the next one.